While much of the focus on the cost of living in recent years has been on daily expenses like groceries and transport, an increasing number of people are also struggling to secure their own place to call home for the long term.
Joining us in studio for insight and advice is Lawrence Sprung. He's the founder of Midland Financial, as well as the author of Financial Planning Made Personal.
And it's great to have you with us on this topic, especially so many people concerned about this. A Redfin survey from earlier this year showed that less than 40% of 28-year-olds just last year owned their own home. And in comparison to baby boomers at the same age, that's less than 50% of what they had. So it's really a stark difference here, and many people are feeling it. What are you seeing in your practice and in the broader community?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things going on. I think one, you're seeing people leave the home a lot later. So their parents' home, they're living at home a lot longer, so they're not necessarily looking for that home, right? And then you've also had this kind of perfect storm situation where you had COVID, you had some work issues, you then had rising interest rates at the same time. Mortgages went from extraordinarily low at 3 and change, all the way up to 5 and 6 and 7. And then you have the fact that the number of houses available on the markets have shrunk too. So you've had this perfect storm that's created a situation where it's very difficult for young people to go out, find homes, and be able to afford them.
What an interesting dichotomy, because what Steph is saying is that the baby boomers, were 50% more likely to own a home at that stage of life. Yet I hear these stories of like 14% interest rates. We talk about 6%, and yet there must be something culturally going on. So I'd love for you to explore, what's the impact for people in owning a home at these various stages of their life?
Yeah, so I would say, people talk about owning a home as the American dream. That's what we're told. I don't know that that's the case anymore if you think about it, right? Because when the baby boomers were looking to buy a home, they would buy a home, they would work for a company or a municipality in that local area for 20, 30, 40 years, and they would remain in that home. Young people today are not doing that. They're not living in the same community for that extended period of time. So if you look at the financial aspect of things, sometimes it doesn't make sense for young people to buy a home. So I think there's another side to this equation that's not being talked about. It's all being talked about from the standpoint of monetary, supply, but I think there's also this dichotomy that maybe the younger people today aren't as interested in home ownership, and maybe it's not the American dream. I think in many cases, the American dream for young people is renting in more cases and being able to use some of that additional income to do other things, experiential things, travel, spending in areas that that are aligned with their resources and goals, rather than putting it into a home that they may not be in for very long.
And so you've described this a perfect storm, and also potentially reframing it as not necessarily a problem. But what do you see as the eye of the storm? What's the core of the issue here?
I think for those young people that want to buy a home, it's financial. It's a struggle, because if they are not living at home where their expenses are low and they're saving that money, right? And they have to rent. Rents are unusually high, especially in locations like major cities, New York, Boston, California. And it makes it very difficult to save and be able to buy that home. And then, even to be able to find a home is problematic because there's not a lot of supply. So, you have I can't say that it's one of those things. I think it's a grouping of all of them coming together is really making it very difficult. And I don't know how much that whole cultural component is having a play on this whole story.
And let's now go to the flip side of that. So maybe you have remote work and you can be in the same community, or you can travel, but you want to own your own home, but now you're feeling like it's a stretch and it might be a bit of a risk. What tips do you have for people who do want to, pull the trigger and reach for that first home ownership?
So I would say people who have the remote work, they love that because they want to work from anywhere. So I don't know that that home ownership really fits, because I know people who work from anywhere and they're traveling, you know, to other countries and working from there, and nobody knows the difference. So
Let's say they want a garden.
but
I
got you. I got you.
How can
but, I mean, if they
them
want to
leave?
do that, then they have to start, you know, mindfully putting a budget together that, you know, satisfies what their situation is today, and start thinking about how much money they need to be putting away for that home, right? In many cases, once they pick up the home and those expenses, there may be parity between the cost of the rental and the cost of the home itself. It may not be a huge stretch. The problem is accumulating enough cash to make the down payment. And the troubling thing is, you know, you want to try to reach that 20% mark for a down payment, because otherwise you're paying private mortgage insurance on top of your mortgage. So if you're putting less than that, that increases your costs overall. So you need to make sure that you're trying to save that amount while you're trying to manage all these other things. And I think one of the problematic things is younger people have a tendency right now, whether it's student loans or credit card, they're in more debt than the baby boomers were at this stage of their life also. So if you're approaching that stage, you want to manage that well and make sure that you're not going to have that additional burden as you're trying to move into home ownership.
And what strategies would you implement for those folks who may not want to own a home but do want that long-term security that home ownership symbolizes?
Yeah, I mean, that's difficult because, you know, there's benefits and challenges with each, right? You have the home, you have security, you know what your costs are roughly going to be, but you have to worry about the repairs and the unknowns. You know, I think everything in my house, we talk about everything expires after 10 years. You have to pretty much replace it, right? And you have to be prepared for that. On the rental side, you don't have those worries. That's the landlord's responsibility. But you have the uncertainty that if the landlord wants to sell the home or they want to increase rents, you're at their liberty. So you have to be a little bit more flexible as a renter and be prepared. If it's somewhere you want to stay, maybe think about locking into a longer term lease. So, you know, and with more certainty with regards to the costs around it, and lock into a longer term lease in terms of, if it's a home that you love, maybe talk to the owner about a lease to buy option. Maybe they're looking to sell it, but they can't or don't want to right now. There might be a lease to buy option. So I think there are other things out there that you can position in a way that might be beneficial to you.
And Lawrence, last thoughts on the topic. You know, they say we've just done taxes. You know, there could be a benefit if you are a high income earner to having that write-off of that interest of the mortgage. But also, as you pointed out, you know, small house, small problems, big house, big problems. So how do you actually know what the total cost of ownership might be?
Yeah, you have to look at it, and, you know, you want to try to keep your homeowner's costs in terms of mortgage, taxes, insurance, if you have a homeowners association, within roughly 30% of your total gross income, right? And then you need to factor in some kind of repair mechanism. You know, I think I've heard somewhere in the realm of 1% to 2% of the home value, kind of expect that you're going to have to do repairs and maintenance over time. So it's just something to think about it. But as a homeowner, I could tell you myself, there's always something that goes wrong. I'm on the other side. I'm looking to sell and potentially go to rent because I don't want the headaches anymore. So I understand both sides of the equation.
Well said, as always. Lawrence Sprung, thank you so much for joining us. Always great insights and such a topic, right? You know, should I stay or should I go, right?
Tough one. It's a tough one.